This episode of the Officer Down Memorial Podcast is sponsored in part by Law Enforcement Labor Services in Minnesota.
Law Enforcement Labor Services, also known as LELS, is Minnesota's largest public safety labor union, with over 7,000 Minnesota public safety members serving in all areas of public safety. Law enforcement, 911 dispatch centers, corrections, public safety administrative support personnel, and firefighters. Established in 1977, LELS serves over 260 different public safety agencies and over 450 locals across the state of Minnesota. With their administration, general counsel, 3 staff attorneys, and 14 business agents, LELS provides contract negotiations for better wages and benefits, grievance processing and representation, discipline representation, mediation and arbitration, assistance with representation for post-board hearings, and in-line of duty death benefits for survivor families. Find out more about Law Enforcement Labor Services at LELS.org. LELS.org.
Episodes of the Officer Down Memorial Podcast may contain strong language and violent content. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Sheriff Scott Rose from Minnesota, and I'm your host for today's new episode of the Officer Down Memorial Podcast.
Walking eastbound.
In each episode of the Officer Down Memorial Podcast, we'll share the details and the stories of how these men and women heroically lost their lives in the line of duty. Our mission is to help ensure their service and sacrifice is never forgotten. Thanks for spending some time with me today to remember and honor these fallen heroes. Years after Ford and Chevrolet were founded, an automobile manufacturer by the name of Walter Percy Chrysler founded the Chrysler Corporation with their first car this year. It was called the Chrysler 70, in part due to an impressive top speed that year of 70 miles per hour. The 70 offered advanced features and sophisticated engineering, including the first passenger car to offer 4-wheel hydraulic brakes as standard equipment, significantly improving safety. All starting at $1,600 for the open-top Roadster. The Norse American Centennial, the 100th anniversary of the first organized Norwegian immigration to America. It was held at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds this year. Their keynote speaker was President Calvin Coolidge, our 30th President of the United States.
From Nashville, Tennessee, Prince Albert, the world's most popular smoking tobacco, brings you the South's most popular program, the Grand Ole Opry.
The Grand Ole Opry did its first radio broadcast on WSM Radio in Nashville this year.
Shoes on, got my hair slicked down, having a big time tonight. Can of good Prince Albert boys.
It started as the WSM Barn Dance in the new 5th floor radio studio of the National Life and Accident Insurance Company in downtown Nashville, Tennessee. The year was 1925. With just over 3 inches of snow all month, it had been a relatively dry December in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Christmas back in 1925 was very much family-centered. Roasted goose or turkey for dinner, followed by family gatherings around the Christmas tree, decorated with handmade ornaments, strings of popcorn, and new this year, electric Christmas tree lights. The kids, they were excited to open their gifts. Popular that year were radios, Kodak cameras, ice skates, and train sets. Culture in 1925 was defined by the Jazz Age and Prohibition. Beer, wine, and intoxicating liquor had been banned for 5 years by then. New Year's Eve was coming, with large crowds expected in large public places like Times Square in New York City, while others would partake in underground speakeasies and celebrate with illegal cocktails. Other new establishments like soda shops and ballrooms emerged in the city, serving alcohol in secret. Moonshining had also become common, along with medicinal alcohol. The National Prohibition Act, or Volstead Act, allowed for the sale and prescription of alcohol for medicinal purposes, often a loophole used by bootleggers to acquire and distribute alcohol. The population of Minneapolis in 1925 was around 420,000 people, and it was considered a major industrial center in the United States, with major companies like Pillsbury and General Mills, originally Washburn and Crosby, headquartered in the city. That being said, production had steadily been declining since 1921, with agricultural prices having fallen since the end of World War I. Minnesota's farmers were struggling, and when farmers struggle in Minnesota, everyone struggles. The city of Minneapolis was also recovering from a devastating smallpox epidemic that struck from late 1924 to early 1925, resulting in 365 deaths in the state. Frank W. Brunskill had been appointed chief of police for Minneapolis that year and would lead the 300-plus officer department by continuing to add automobiles to their patrol units, replacing much of the horseback and walking patrols. One of the veteran officers of the Minneapolis Police Department in 1925 was 58-year-old Michael J. Lawrence. Michael was born Michael Oceani in the southern Minnesota city of Owatonna to Polish-born immigrants Frank and Francisca. When Michael turned 5 years old, his parents moved the family to the Twin Cities for better working opportunities. At some point, records seem to indicate they changed their last name a few times. They changed it from the surname Oceani to O'Shaney. Then, around the turn of the century, they would change their last name again to Lawrence. It's not documented or known why they chose to anglicize their name, but some families would change their name to better assimilate into American society, some to avoid discrimination and prejudice, or some to just simplify their names. The family burial plot still has the main family monument that says O'Shaney, but then the individual markers indicate the name Lawrence. As a young man, Michael was employed as a logger on the Mississippi River at the Minneapolis Lumber Mills, but at the age of 30, he joined the Minneapolis Police Department on July 10, 1899. Michael would start as a patrolman. Later, he was promoted to desk sergeant of the 4th Precinct Station, and then he was transferred and placed in charge of the No. 4 Gun Squad on the north side. Large areas of North Minneapolis have historically been known to have higher frequencies of property and violence crimes. The Gun Squad was a unit that would respond to firearms-related calls or higher priority calls within their respective districts. Minneapolis had experienced a spree of violent crime over the month, including the killing of Leonard Erdahl, a former U of M football star who was fatally wounded in a holdup on December 9th. William H. Sears, a druggist, was wounded in a gunfight with 2 bandits, one of whom shot him, and Dr. W.R. Whitney was kidnapped and wounded by one of 3 bandits. Albert Manchester and his wife were working in their grocery store at 1500 4th Street North when a man entered and asked for a pound of apples. Mrs. Manchester walked to the rear of the store when the man pulled a gun on Albert. The man was Stanley Sabin. He'd been paroled from Stillwater State Prison 2 weeks earlier for the second time in 6 years, after being twice sentenced to serve terms of 5 to 40 years for highway robbery. He had also spent 5 years at the St. Peter's State Hospital for mental health issues. His parole conditions included he be deported to his original home in Manitoba, Canada. Sabin was still wearing prison clothes when he walked into the family-owned grocery store. When he pulled the gun, Albert, who was standing behind the counter, ran for a side door in the store that led to his home. Sabin ordered him to halt. That's when Albert reached for his revolver and shot at Sabin. Sabin returned fire, shot Albert twice, once in the abdomen and once in the wrist. Albert went to the ground. Sabin ran out the front door and down the street while Albert fired 2 more shots at him. Mrs. Manchester called the police at their Northside precinct. The Northside Precinct Gun Squad was led by veteran Sergeant Michael Lawrence. His team included 34-year-old patrolman Bird Wynn and 37-year-old patrolman Clarence Zane. Within 10 minutes, police squads, detectives, and patrolmen were combing the north side on the hunt for the unknown shooter. Michael and his gun squad also responded to the area. They stopped and talked to about a half dozen people in the area when they observed a man that matched the description given of the shooter. The man was on the corner of 14th Avenue North and 6th Street North. They thought, based on the description given, he might be their suspect. Patrolman Zane was driving and pulled over to the curb by the suspect. Michael, who was sitting next to him in the front, exited on the passenger side, while Patrolman Wynn exited from the back seat. The suspect, later identified as Sabin, had both hands in his overcoat pockets, and when Michael approached him, Sabin drew a pistol and opened fire. Michael was shot once in the head and once in the heart, and he went down to the ground. Sabin ran. Patrolman Wynn started chasing him and opened fire with his revolver. Sabin returned fire, hitting Wynn 3 times in the leg. Patrolman Zane, who was still seated behind the wheel when the shooting happened, backed his car across the curb onto a lawn when he saw Sabin turn from the street and run between 2 buildings. Zane chased Sabin on foot to the rear of a house at 1326 6th Street North. Zane ran around the opposite side of the house and met Sabin on the other side. Sabin tried to shoot towards Zane, but he ran out of ammo. Zane returned fire and hit Sabin in the head. Patrolman Wynn, while wounded in the leg, staggered to Zane's side a few seconds later. Wynn then kept watch over the shooter while Zane went back to help Michael. By the time Zane got back to Michael, he was dead. Zane called for an ambulance. To Patrolman Wynn's surprise, Sabin then tried to get up and resist when he got to his hands and knees. Patrolman Wynn struck him twice over the head with the butt of his revolver. Sabin went down again. Wynn then took his gun and was on the ground searching the now unconscious shooter for any more weapons when Zane returned to help. At the General Hospital where Sabin was taken to be treated, he was questioned and asked by a patrol stenographer, "Were you ever in the penitentiary?" Sabin answered, "Yes, I did 11 years for nothing." They then asked if it was for robbery or burglary. Sabin only shrugged his shoulders, and then he died without saying another word. Patrolman Wynn was treated at the same hospital for his gunshot wounds. He had been on the police force for a little more than 2 years and was a veteran, having served with the 327th Infantry, 92nd Division in France. He was also wounded in the war. Albert Manchester, the grocer, was also treated and released from the hospital. Patrolman Clarence Zane was the one that stopped the shooter and the only one not injured. He too had been on the force for about 2 years. He was a war veteran, serving as a lieutenant in the 1st Division and served overseas 23 months, participating in a number of battles. Sergeant Michael J. Lawrence was 58 years old and had been a member of the Minneapolis Police Department, serving in some of the highest crime neighborhoods for 26 years. Michael had been eligible to retire with a pension 6 years earlier, but according to his wife, he felt at the time he was not in a financial position to do so. She also explained about a year prior to his murder, they made the last payment on their home. She explained in a newspaper article that he continued working so they would have enough money to see them through any emergency. Michael's wife wanted him to stop working, but he felt that he couldn't. Newspaper reports indicate his wife said Michael had planned to keep on working into the fall of 1926, when he was going to retire and they were going to take it easy. Other sources reported that he was just weeks or days away from retirement. Michael Lawrence was survived by his wife Effie and 4 children. Led by Frank W. Brunskill, Minneapolis Chief of Police, 125 Minneapolis and St. Paul police officers formed a guard of honor at the funeral service for their fallen colleague. Sergeant Michael J. Lawrence was buried at St. Mary's Cemetery. Michael Lawrence not only served his entire career in Minneapolis, he lived there. He raised his family there. It was more than a job to Michael. This was his home. He and his wife lived in the 4th Precinct where he worked. He spent over 2 decades doing his little part to make this community a little safer for his family, for his kids, his neighbors, and his friends. Michael believed in service before self. He believed in being a part of something bigger than himself. North Minneapolis was his community, and he gave his life serving his community. Sergeant Michael J. Lawrence was the 14th Minneapolis police officer killed in the line of duty and is recognized in the city each year at an annual law enforcement memorial ceremony held by the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office and Minneapolis Police Department. He's also remembered each year on May 15th by the Minnesota Law Enforcement Memorial Association, and his name is etched on the National Law Enforcement Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C., where the National Memorial Service is held each year honoring and remembering all fallen officers in the United States. On our website, there are various photos of Michael in uniform, along with a photo of his home, a handwritten diagram of the shooting, the complaint report from 1925, and photos of the family gravesite at St. Mary's Cemetery. Thank you for helping us ensure Michael J. Lawrence's service and sacrifice with Minneapolis Police Department is never, ever forgotten.
Walking eastbound.
Thank you for spending the time to listen, learn about, and honor the memory of this fallen hero. Make sure you take the time to thank your local law enforcement for their service and their sacrifice. And don't forget to thank their families too. They also sacrifice so much for our safety. It's up to us to help ensure the sacrifices made by these fallen heroes and by their families are never forgotten. So please share this podcast with family and friends. Until next time, this is the Officer Down Memorial Podcast. I'm Scott Rose. Thanks for listening.